Once a gating analysis has been performed in GateLogic, samples can be dragged into the GraphLogic workspace, where specific population statistics can be displayed, graphed, and statistically analysed. A new feature in FlowLogic, designed to increase the speed at which samples can be added to the GraphLogic workspace, is the ability to import sample data from a plate. Here I will demonstrate adding samples to a plate in PlateLogic in terms of experimental groups, with one row in the plate representing an entire experimental group. These samples can be added to a plate at any stage of the analysis, but adding them prior to gating can make selection of the different experimental groups much easier. To create a plate, click in the Plate window of the Advanced Functions pull-up drawer and select New PlateLogic. In this first example, I have 96 samples, and I will assume experimental groups of 12. So I can grab all of my samples and drag them directly into a 96 well plate. As a different example, I may have 3 groups of 5. So if I generate a new plate, I can open the plate side drawer, and in the first tab, being the plate setup tab, change the width and height to be 5 and 3. And now, if I choose the experimental folder containing this second set of experimental files, I can select them all and drag them into the plate. And in this case, the format for importing into GraphLogic is already defined. As I have already applied a gating template to these files, the next step is to click through to GraphLogic and then select the PlateLogic tab at the top of the file navigator, then click and drag the relevant plate directly into the workspace. Now the data can be selected, and from the drop-down menu, I can choose my gate, and then I can select the entire table and drag it into a table folder. Clicking on the Graph tab will open the graph in the Graph workspace, and I can format the graph by clicking on the different components or the words in the corners of the Graph window to access the corresponding formatting panel. And as GraphLogic remains linked to GateLogic, if I return to GateLogic and adjust my gate, all of the data and therefore the graph is updated in GraphLogic. Now, to import my second plate, I follow the same process, but this time click and drag plate number 2 directly into the workspace. I can highlight my data, choose my population of interest, right-click on the workspace folder to add a new table folder, drag the data into the table folder, and then open the graph in the workspace. And now I can click on the bars to set a new color for each group. I could import this plate again, or simply copy and paste the data within the workspace. Select the data points themselves, and choose a different population from the drop-down menu. But instead of creating a new table folder, I will clone the previous folder, as it will maintain all of the formatting. Now I can drag the new data into the cloned table folder to replace the original values. Along with creating additional table folders, additional workspace folders can also be created. Now, in terms of adding samples to a plate, I will show how samples can be added to any well in any order. Here I will create another plate with the same dimensions as we had in plate 2, being 5 by 3. I will also hide the gating hierarchy in the file inspector by choosing rows, show hide gates and hide gates, and now demonstrate that I can drag in 5 samples at a time, 3, or individual samples into any well. And it doesn't matter when it comes to inserting this plate into GraphLogic if there are empty wells. And this is in terms of performing statistical analyses or in graphing the data.